director and said, hey, there's somebody with a scary mask on trying to scare my kid. And she described them as dressed like one of the guides, and how they explained what might have happened. The museum director explained that the museum is haunted, and that the Abenaki tribe, they were from Maine, and they came to fight with the French, and so they would use a term called flaying, where when somebody was already dead, they would cut their skin off, cut the skin off their face and wear it as a mask. And they believed that they could see through the eyes of their enemy and find their camp. So we think that she's seen the victim of the Abenaki tribe. And now we are going to head over to the well.
I'm gonna go down there.
So I think they're telling us what they're doing there, but we go on. I want to see this.
I heard of eating like the heart of your enemy, never that.
So we have three original parts of the fort. One is the last 25 feet of this well, approximately. There's about 6 feet of rock and dirt piled up for the reconstruction of the fort. So it's about 31 feet in total. Also, if you come during the day, you can go down into the powder magazine, which has original cobblestones in the floor. And then later, we're going to be going down in the casemate and we'll see the original fireplace. So this well was dug by Rogers Rangers in January of 1756. Why in January of all times? Because it was rather unsafe for them to go outside the walls of the fort. So they decided to dig a well for water. And at first they got clear water. They thought they were getting it from the lake, but they didn't realize that they actually built this fort on a swamp. So with all the sickness here, they soon had a very contaminated well. Dysentery was a big one here, so that's when you have diarrhea until you die.
Yeah.
They are pooping a lot. Where are they pooping? Not in the well, but over the sides of the walls. And then, in March of that year alone, they had 300 people die. They had a lot of bodies piling up. They tried to put them in the hospital. That didn't work for very long. So then where did they decide to store them? Over the sides of the walls. Which is okay when everything's frozen in the middle of winter, but soon spring came, and that's fighting season. So not all those bodies got buried. So everything started to melt and decompose and go right into the swamp, which contaminated the well. They actually had to give the British rations of rum to mix with the water. That's how bad it was to drink. And the British, they weren't known for being very hygienic though to begin with. They actually made fun of the French and Native Americans for breaking through the ice on Lake George during the winter to be able to bathe. You're lucky if you got a British soldier to bathe every 3 months. They also did not believe in brushing their teeth, so they would gargle with urine instead. It is an antiseptic, but very gross. Reportedly, you could smell this fort from 3 miles away. But now we're going to fast forward. 1880s, this whole thing has been burned down quite a while before. It was just a forested area. And there's a well that's been forgotten about and left uncovered. Now, this wasn't called the Village of Lake George yet. It was called the Village of Caldwell, after the founder. And there was a trolley line that went from Saratoga up to Caldwell so that people could come and camp and vacation. Well, one day, a family went to go home on the trolley, and they discovered that one of their daughters was missing. So, according to newspapers of the time, they ended up staying here an extra week. Searching for her. The whole village went out searching dive team. They went into the well, they didn't find any. But now we have sightings of a little girl in Victorian clothing in the doorway, peeking out the window there and running down the powder ring, which is just a long hallway with a dead end. One of our guides during the day saw a little girl go down there by herself. When you check on her, nobody down there. Also, we have a lot of psychics come on the tours. And a few weeks ago, we had a guy who was drawn to the window above where the little girl is seen. He said he had a bad feeling about that area. But we hadn't heard anything about the north barracks there. So we asked one of the guides who's been here for a couple of years. She said one time the paranormal team was here, and she was with them up in the top of the North Barracks, and the psychic who was with them told her, never come in here by yourself at night. There's something that stays in the tailor shop behind the red shutters there during the day, and then at night, it comes out through the rest of the building. And the psychic did not feel that this presence was human. So we might have a demon up there.
Hell yeah.
But if everybody wants to follow Connor, he's going to lead you right in front of the creepy window and up to the left.
Oh, look in the well. Hold on. Oh, there's a cover. Can you see the end there?
That close. You can barely see the glasses.
Don't fall. Okay. I think they have these nice stairs. Maybe they have to like climb. Ooh.
This is really beautiful.
To be fair, I think it was sold out, so usually you have to book it. Alrighty, so welcome to our northeast bastion. I have to kind of stand here because the wind is going this way. Nonetheless, our northeast bastion here is, of course, another place with a lot of trauma involved with that. A lot of stories about paranormal. In particular, we start out during the siege, a story that came up in the British Journal. It's the story of an individual carpenter during the mortar shelter, which had managed to take down the walls. And during this time, of course, this was a huge disgrace because
wonder if it's unlucky that the candle went out.
No. Unless they close them off, that's
I've heard of the shoot cannon off of here. About to get stabbed by the demon. Stabs you. Just gently, like poke. It's like, oh, you can't do things. Oh my God, it's a cannon.
Not a real cannon, but it's a cannon.
It even has a little fuse area.
Okay, so welcome to the Northwest Bastion. Now this is the bastion that's going to take the brunt of all the damage and be very extensively destroyed during the siege. The reason for this is because the French, they're going to dig their trenches about 2 miles away. If you've ever been to the north end of Lake George, right where the high school is, that's where they're going to start digging their trenches. They're going to fire upon the fort from that direction. This bastion naturally points towards that direction. They're going to get closer and closer, and as they get closer and closer, more and more damage is going to be done to this particular place. This will be the area where there is the Doomsday area for the British. That's going to happen on the 9th of August, 1757. A 32-pound French mortar that'll be shot off only about 200 yards away at that point is going to crash through the floor here. There's going to be a big issue with that. There's a second powder magazine. It's the reserve powder magazine room underneath this bastion. That's going to cause a major explosion here. Everybody's going to be incinerated or obliterated at once. All 16 men that were fighting on the bastion at this point were killed instantly. It was reported that the French could practically walk into Colonel Monroe's office and say, it's over right from there. His office is right in that end of the North Barracks. It was pretty terrible for the British right here. So at that point, that's when Lieutenant Colonel Monroe is going to surrender to the Marquis de Montcalm, and this siege will be over until the massacre. Anyways, we do have an apparition that hangs around this area. He's actually been sighted by one of the individuals who opens up the fort during the summer. She drives to work on this road right here. This is Beach Road. She lives on the other side of the lake. So, she's actually seen an apparition wearing red, walking back and forth along this north wall right here. At first, she actually thought it was somebody that broke in to watch the sunrise during the day. She looked like a normal person, expressionless. They thought they had broken overnight. She's going to investigate cautiously. When she gets up here, she's not going to find anyone. Now she's going to have this process repeat a couple times for her. She's going to see this same apparition a couple more times in the next upcoming months. She decides that she's going to try to put a kibosh to it and then investigate it on her own hands. She was a paranormal enthusiast, so she had EVPs with her, electronic voice phenomenons. She's going to leave a couple up here, but she's only ever going to get one recording. It's going to be one name. The name Jacob. Keep that name in the back of your head while we continue our tour in the basement. Jacob.
Jacob?
Yes.
All right, folks, we're going to continue our tour now. Johnny, we're going to continue down the street right
And
here.
this here.
Have you seen this? This is very cool.
Jacob pokes you with the bayonet.
Ah, fuck. Okay.
Can. Oh man. Wow, that's powerful. I'm about to become a ghosty. That looks so mad splintery. It is. It gets cocaine. Ah, bloody hands. I need a bandit. Oh, look. That's so cool.
You go see my face.
I swear, I think he just moved.
Before we go down into the casemate, which is just the old fashioned basement, I want to talk about this door right here. I was in the of the row, and literally was been blown away with the explosion. We have some kind of like be going on with this door though. One night, one of our tour guides thought it would be really funny if after us that night, and a man went and banged on the door 3 times, loudly. There was another guy standing right at that window right there looking in, and we all heard loud banging back on the door. Nobody was in there. So, if anybody wants to give it a go, this is the
You
time.
want to try it?
As tempting as it is to cause a speed.
Go ahead.
Anyone gonna give it a whirl?
There you go.
Alrighty.
You try it.
We must be safe. Please be careful coming down the stairs.
I do want to try it. I can't. I'm going to get a bite.
And over here banging back. Smells like a nice cabin. Wow, they had some nice construction here. I'm going to the corner. Oh, there's a little thing there. Okay. One, two.
Original fireplace. There was an earthquake at one point, so that's why it looks a little rough. But we have an apparition down here. We have Baby Mary. And you get a picture of Mary behind the glass. Wearing white or a white orb. However, you have to be careful with reflection and flash. Because we had a guy who thought he got a picture of a skull, but it was just his t-shirt. Mary often presents with smells, so if you smell cinnamon, honey, molasses, baking bread, it might be Mary. I smelled apple cinnamon the other night when we were doing the tours, and I was the last one coming down. Also, she is known around here as a bit of a grumpy lunch lady. She is a residual spirit who thinks it's still 1765 or 66 or 56, sorry. And she has a lot of smelly boys upstairs that she's trying to feed. So she gets a little impatient with people and she tends to give them a shove, which she's been doing this summer on the stairs. But now, if you guys want to come into the room with Creepy Mannequin,
Creepy mannequin.
Alright guys, just want to let it along as you want so everyone can get a little bit of this.
Let's go.
Alright, so what you see here is an example of 18th century amputation. It's an amputation station. That's how they did all their surgeries back then during this time. So, ideally, this would have been not the greatest place for having a second hospital, but there were dozens of people getting injured at a time. So, unfortunately for the British, they had to resort to using this. All they had were benches and tables here in the West Casemate, because again, this was originally the dining hall. I'm going to take you on a step-by-step process on how to do this amputation. First things first, we do not have any painkillers here at Fort William Henry. Opium, of course, is known, but it's not really used here. Ether hasn't really been used here at this time either. But what these guys did have was alcohol in the form of rum in upstate New York, and they had a lot of it. The British Army had plenty of rations, and these guys were avid anti-alcohol, so they usually did not drink their rum because Puritan Christians, again, drink. They did for this special occasion, though, because these individuals needed to be inebriated enough so they would be in the wrong state of mind so they could get their limb literally chopped off. After they're inebriated, they're going to be laid down onto the table, or if they had a cot in the East Barracks, the other hospital is, wherever they can, they'll be laid down and given a lead musket ball. Now that lead musket ball is going to be put right in between their teeth. The ultimate goal is because when you're in extreme pain, you naturally clench your jaw together, you don't shatter your teeth. That lead musket ball right there was actually found at Fort Edward. There was no major siege at Fort Edward. The only time they had a major siege there, or was actually the retreating massacre survivors from Fort William Henry.
So there really wasn't any, there was death there, but not to the extent there was here. So there's a solid chance this musket ball was used for that exact occasion on an individual that was part of that massacre at William Henry. There are even teeth marks into it. They used lead, by the way, because lead is a soft metal. Obviously, they didn't realize it was poisonous at the time, but they did realize that since it is so soft, it won't break your teeth or shatter them. Anyways, going back to this now, the doctor will take out a scalpel, he'll take out his bone saw. He'll cut, of course, with the scalpel, the skin, tendon, fat, wherever he needs to cut, and then he'll grab his bone saw. He'll start sawing through that bone, whatever appendage is being cut, whether it's a hand, a leg, an arm, a foot, etc. He'll get about 90% of the way through that bone. He'll stop, take out the saw, and put it down. He'll then grab that bone and snap it. We have evidence of this because we have done through our excavations over the past 70 years or so. Every time we find an amputee, it's almost guaranteed to have bone spurs on the end of it. So that's proof of these surgeons doing this. Anyways, they're going to snap the bone, put the appendage to the side, and then the surgeon or one of his aides will run to that oven over there. They're going to grab a hot iron skillet, run back, and then they're going to press it against the wound. The ultimate goal for this is to cauterize it to stop further blood flow. The last step that the surgeon will do is he'll take the skin flaps that are still left, put them together, and then sew them up. He's actually going to use animal intestines to do this because animal intestines, for the most part, can be absorbed into the human skin. The preferred animal to do this with was domesticated cats, but we didn't have a lot of house cats at Fort William Henry, so we used whatever we could get. It was a pretty gruesome process. A lot of people are going to feel extreme pain because they're fully conscious this entire time this is happening, and a lot of them are going to die. I would estimate that only between half and two-thirds are going to survive in the first place. There's going to be, of course, that main issue, though, of blood loss. We're also not only cutting somebody's appendage off while they're fully conscious, but we're adding alcohol into their bloodstream. What does alcohol do to the human blood? It thins it out. So now they're bleeding in even a more greater alarm. It's going to be horrible for a lot of these guys. The other issue, though, is one that's less expected until we actually dive into it and talk about it. Infection. Now, besides to avoid deformity, because when you're shot by a musket ball, it shatters your bone, so when it heals, they didn't have the proper cast or anything at the time. They wanted to avoid deformities. But the reason why they're also doing a lot of these amputations is to simply avoid disease and infection. Gangrene, for example, is the big killer here at Fort William Henry. The ultimate goal was to simply just cut off the appendage. We get rid of the wound that could cause the infection in the first place. The big issue with this, though, is that those surgical wounds that are left from the amputation, they're then now trying to clean these wounds with the same swampy, poopy well water that's up from that well. It was pretty bad. We're taking that disease and putting it right back into the blood flow at an even faster rate. Hundreds of men are going to suffer from this, and many are going to die. It was reported that one individual here had to get his leg amputated 4 additional times after his initial one, just because he could not keep it clean of an infection. It was pretty gruesome. Anyways, we do have one apparition that hangs back here, one entity. He's actually a tall, shadowy figure that hangs out in the back and where the brick is. We've given him the name Doc just out of respect for where he is. Obviously, we don't know if he was a surgeon, an aide, or even a victim, but since he hangs out here, we're just going to call him Doc. Now, the funny thing about Doc, though, is his height. He's quite tall, well over 6 feet tall. The British at this time, they were nowhere near this at all, nowhere close. 5'6" was the average height of a British soldier at the time. You were lucky if you had soldiers over the height of 5'9", 5'10". The French are going to be even shorter than this, though. There's going to be a famine in France during this time, and a lot of people are going to suffer from different heart complications and different growth deformities, one being height. The French are only going to be about 4'9" to 5'2" on average, so they're all quite short individuals. I'll leave you one last thing before we go into the guard room. If you've ever heard that Napoleon Bonaparte was a short man, it's actually British propaganda. He was 5'4", which means he was slightly above average for a height of an adult male at the time. They just said that because the British wanted to make fun of Napoleon, more or less. So, I do invite you to take pictures here, but do remember, if you see a face, it might be your own. It's made out of glass. With that, we're going to come over here to the guard chat. Casey's going to talk about what's going on here.
How the operation in the background.
Talk to me, thanks. Beans.
Glass magnets.
Wow, that's nice glass. They got labels.
Okay, so welcome to our guard shed. This is where the guards will keep the keys to the provisions. Those are storage lockers right there. When we first got them from the UK, the blueprints, we thought it said prisons, and that's why they looked like that, but they said provisions. What they did to the prisoners, they tied them naked to the front gate, and whatever happens, happens. Now, down here in the casemate is where the most innocence was lost during the massacre. The natives, they came down that staircase, we came down, and there was only one way in and one way out. They massacred everyone that stood in their way, men, women, British, French, and the British, as they came down, they just massacred everyone. The British that could get up from their cots, they got up and they tried to flee towards this wall, but to no avail. Up against this wall is where the natives finished them all off. The men that did manage to try to escape. And right here is what us paranormal enthusiasts call a hotspot, and which means this area is very, very active. And if you take pictures in this area, you will get orbs. And orbs are little balls of light that is the spirit trying to manifest itself to say, hey, I'm still here. And sometimes they're white, sometimes they're green or red or even orange. And sometimes these mannequins are two shadows to one mannequin. And these bottles on the table, they're circled with white paint because they tend to move. They moved as early as last week. And on EVPs, we've gotten no escape and trapped. And psychics and mediums that have come down here, they feel a feeling of fear and dread. And without knowing what happened down here, some people won't even come down here. They get a very bad feeling about coming down here. We had that happen earlier this week. And speaking of EVPs, back to our story about our maintenance workers. So our maintenance